We get to people is by, we're talking now, but then we give people little samples, little drinks, and they go, oh, that's really good, okay, fine. That's the way to change the world. So these are nutritional heroes. I mean, it's just nice, fresh food that, we make at our school or my wife makes at home, which I appreciate. And there's a cookbook called Flavors of Health. You'll see that in a minute. And these are what I call nutritional bandits. So years ago I made kind of the chart because bandits are out there for health. And when you're dealing with kids, that was it. Now, the little character I had was kind of an Afro-American character, and I went, I can't be using that. I gotta kind of give me blonde hair. So I took the African-American kind of cartoon figure, and I gave him blonde hair and, changed him around so it looked like Jesus Christ. Actually, people said, wow, gotta watch out for that guy. But really, the idea, and this is kind of a big point here, is the problem with meat products and dairy products is how horrible those animals are raised, and how much hormone they've had. I mean, they've had a lot of growth hormone, because that makes them big and heavy and fat and more milk. And then people eat that, and you get these, little girls who are 8 years old, and, they're too big, So that's the biggest issue. And people eat a lot of dairy. People really like dairy. So the idea is give dairy a rest for a while, and then when you come back, get it organic and get it full fat dairy. Because that's, again, one of the bigger conversations is low-fat, no-fat versus whole milk dairy. And the dairy fats from healthy cows actually are very helpful. And then you don't have to eat as much. Now, if you're used to low-fat milk, and you drink a glass of whole milk with cream in it, it's too creamy. Right? So put water in it. Just like juice. Just cut it in half with water, stir it around, and it's a thinner, and then you got, instead of a liter, you got a quart, yeah.
What about goats? Are they raised any better?
Goats are okay. Goats have not been domesticated. By and large, goats will eat most anything. So most people do pretty well with goat products. All right, we're going to zoom on. This is a wonderful cookbook, and we have some in the back. So the peace message to world leaders is make dinner, not war. Now think about that. You go places, you go, come on, let's have a little dinner party together. You bring your food, you bring your food, we'll sit down, but it's gluten-free. Or we'll have gluten for you, but not for me, whatever you want. But the idea is eating together really is a way of culture, building good culture, without fighting, over the foods. All right, GMOs. Okay, we'll do a short GMO and then we'll have a long conversation. So we all know, I think, that they're artificially inserted with genes from animals, bacteria, virus, insects, or even humans, that would be odd, that would never make in nature to, obtain an effect. The so-called effect is enhancement of the crop and greater yield and feed the world. So again, when you listen, they go, wow, that sounds pretty good. It's genetic enhancement. Right? Yeah, but it's not healthy. In reviewing the evidence, it appears that genetically modified foods is the most dangerous and radical change in our food supply ever. That's my quote. So it's the worst thing there's ever been. Okay? And it threatens the health of people who eat it. Yeah.
So how do you explain that to people? What do you tell them? Because I know a lot of people that say they haven't seen scientific evidence, and there's a book out called GMO Roulette, and that's been debunked or whatever the guy is. But where's the scientific evidence?
I'll show you right now.
Okay.
I'll show you right now. And again, if you want this, full show and the rest of it, I've got it. So the main foods are corn, soy, canola, sugar beets, and cotton. And you go, cotton, that's not a food. Actually, cotton oil is used a lot, and even cotton material. And if you get cotton material from China and abroad, it's GMO cotton. It can actually create a lot of topical problems. And in the pipeline, there's rice and wheat and tomatoes and sweet corn and potatoes and popcorn. So most of the GMO corn is fed to animals. Back there, yeah? Apples? I mean, there's plenty of stuff in the pipeline. And they were growing in Kauai. And Kauai just go, no more, and they got rid of it on the island. It's been there for 15 years, so unfortunately it's cross-pollinated, it's in water, but they're together community and they blew it off. All right, so this is kind of the way I see it, is farm to table. You know, we're kind of farm to table people. But if you look at it from Monsanto, and from the business thing, it's pharmacy to table, the symptom, the syndrome to doctor, pharmacy, farm to table. You see, that's like wrong. That's like patently wrong. But you just see it because people have these chronic health problems. They're not functioning well. Their mental health is worse than their physical health. So I don't know that that gets as much play. But when people are not well, they're depressed. And they're anxious and they're very irrational. All right? So people need to understand with genetically engineered food or modified crops, the seeds are owned by the chemical companies, and when we sanction the use of the genetic engineered crops, chemicals are just kind of going all over the place. So these are the list of the crops, Jeffrey Smith. Also, papaya. So, papaya is a nice food, but unless it's an organic papaya that says it's not genetically grown, it likely is, and some forms of zucchini and other squash.
Now, have you ever found a clean papaya lately? I mean, is there a place to...
Probably not.
Not just
Probably not.
organic.
Probably not. Probably not. All right, so the simple strategies here is eat in, don't eat out. Come on, think about that. It's too easy to eat out. It's just too easy. And restaurants are, we don't know what we're getting in a restaurant, even a good restaurant, even a fancy restaurant. And you can ask that you're cooking with olive oil, not canola oil. Canola oil was sold as a health food. Yeah, it still is, yeah.
Most olive oil is adulterated.
You can get cheap olive oil, for sure. You can get olive oil that's not olive oil.
Right, but in a restaurant, you have no guarantee.
You have no guarantees, but your taste and your experience is your barometer. So once you understand what good food tastes like, feels like, energetically is, you go, that was terrible. And I don't think I want that salad dressing. I think I'll bring my own salad dressing. I think I'll bring my own seeds. I think I'll bring my own nutritionist. I think I'll bring, anyway. But eating in is kind of the big deal here. And then, check on what's in the food. How much soy, how much corn, what kind of oil. Number 2 is read labels. And, organic is one of the big ways, but really, if you're buying food that's not in a box, there's no label. So if you're buying produce, you're just buying produce, and the question is, where did that come from? Did that come from Chile? Did that come from New Zealand? Did that come from Asia? We don't know. I mean, and again, a lot of times when food's out of season, it comes from far away, and it's heavily sprayed. They are often some of the chemicals we don't use here, like DDT, we sell like crazy there, so not good. Not good. And you'll find it in all kinds of flours and starches and textured and sugars, all that stuff. So read your labels. Shop locally. Get to know your farmers. Sebastian's people go, let's go over to his farm. Let's walk around the farm. Let's see what it's like. What are some other local farms or local CSAs that you go to? Huh?
There are a lot of them.
Well, give me a couple names.
First
Sierra Farms.
Sierra Farms is one. What else? Laguna is one, yeah.
Foggy River.
Who?
Foggy River.
Foggy River.
In Hawaii.
Green Stream Farm, Petaluma.
In Hawaii.
In Mali? Okay, that's good. Mine is called something about Dawn. I know my farmer. I've been to the farm.
First Light?
First Light, yeah. Nathan.
Dawn, First Light.
That's what I'm saying, if you're a food person, it's nothing like going to the farm.
Yeah.
And knowing your people. Yeah. And knowing you're giving money to these people and keep them alive, and it's the hardest thing going. It's very hard to make a living growing food. All right. And then, backyard gardens. How many of y'all have something growing in the backyard? All the rest of y'all grow something. That's great. All right. And then grass-fed meat, wild fish, organic cheese and eggs. I think one of the real curiosities is the effect of Fukushima. Because it's horrible. Okay? But, there's still a lot of water between there and here. So you've got to take the relative kind of proportion of risk and buffering compounds. And the ocean has a lot of buffering compounds. Seaweed are amazing buffering compounds. Water is a buffering compound. So I wouldn't want to be in Japan eating, you know, they have like fried fish that hasn't been fried, right? The radiation is, you know, incredibly high. Okay? But they have a pretty interesting traditional diet. They do a lot of fermented foods. They do a lot of whole grains. They have a lot of condiments. They have a lot of, you know, all that kind of stuff. So they tolerated, you know, the atomic bomb, and they tolerated, you know, they're adapting pretty well. I'm not saying it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. But yet, even when levels go up, it's still relative to what other kind of buffers you're getting from phytonutrients and micronutrients in your food. So again, so far, you know, a lot of the deep fish are still in the ballpark, and then probably the most cost-effective fish is a sardine. So for somebody who goes, I don't cook, blah, 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 little can of sardines will support your brain like nothing else.
Are you sure? What about all the fish that are supposed to be full of mercury and everything?
I'm seeing somewhere. Salmon is not a mercury binder. Halibut is not a mercury binder. So this is the mushy thinking that people get. Huh?
I'm not sure.
It's a little mushy there. You like mushy pork? You know? So that can happen. But this company I'm mentioning on the slide is called Vital Choice. Good source of seafood information. They check batches of food. You can get stuff from them dry or canned that's good. And they'll check for mercury, they'll check for radiation, they check for things. There's also a source in there of grassland beef. Good source of, you know, again, is this healthy, clean, or not? Very important. All right, the shopping guide. Sonoma County has an amazing shopping guide, right? So, you know, hats off to Occupy Sonoma County. I mean, it's just
updated it.
There you go. Go over. So again, if you're looking at companies and parents of companies, because there's kind of like, you know, so-and-so is a health company, but they're owned by a not-health company. You know, and like, we'd rather not support them. So we'll talk about that as we go along. Very, very useful guide, and this is a good one right here, too. So this is some of the health, you know, risk problems, and this Dr. Emily Linder is a medical doctor from Seattle area, and she said when people stop eating genetically modified food, corn, soy, sugar, you know, oil, she saw changes in these really chronic health problems that you know, weren't going away, particularly around the digestive area. So these are the kind of complaints that people in this room have, right? Irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, infertility, weight loss, erectile dysfunction, ulcers, blood pressure, fatigue, anxiety, gut, allergies, asthma, migraines, and so forth and so on. These are very common problems. And medical doctors, unless they're very progressive, they just suppress the symptoms. That's about all they can do. And they try one remedy and another remedy, and then people get older, and they're on 6 to 10 pharmaceuticals. And they're not well. Okay? So these things are exacerbated by GMO food. So there's 4 causes of these problems that this is going to report. The first cause is the process of creating genetically modified crops creates unpredictable changes in DNA and plant composition. So if you're modifying the plant, modifying the seed, you're going to have problems in the stomach line. So this is kind of curious, that if you're going to have digestion, you have to have good villi in the small intestine. They're like these finger-like things that your food goes through, and when the villi get worn down or they get burnt out, then you have Crohn's or celiac, and you know, absorption is bad, and health gets very bad. So this was a comparison in human studies. Altered nutrients, there's increased nutrients, something called lectins. And so lectins are in a lot of plant foods. They're in a lot of grains. They're in a lot of beans. And they bind with proteins and make them unavailable to the cells, and they're antigenic. So the genetically modified foods have more lectin. They have something called a trypsin inhibitor. Trypsin is a protein enzyme. So they have enzyme inhibitors, and then something called lignans. And some lignans are really good. Flax seeds have lignans. Lignans, lignans, and so forth. But it's also less protein, compromised fats, diminish some of the amino acids, and then the plant estrogens are not in the proper shape. So the one thing I want to say about soy, because soy is a pretty controversial food in general, is soy is called a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator. Okay? So what does that mean? If your estrogen's too high and you have an organic soy, I'm not talking GMO, I'm talking organic, it will minimize the overproduction of estrogen and the prolific effects of too much estrogen, which is what many people are dealing with cancers and with reproductive disorders and with cysts, and it's the food environment and the chemicals, the lipid-based chemicals are very estrogenic. So even men are very estrogenic right now. But good quality beans, whether it's soy or garbanzo or lima beans or kidney beans, they have kind of this estrogen neutralizing effect. So it's kind of important. Somebody has an estrogen positive cancer, the doctor says, well, none of those soybeans. I argue I disagree with that. And I'm not saying soy, because some people overdo it. But again, the literature is pretty interesting around that. And likewise with prostate health. The second cause, the protein produced by isolated genes can be harmful. So you're looking at the protein. Protein is where the greatest antigens are. People have food allergies. It's typically the proteins. So the biotoxin in the crops is 1,000 times more concentrated in the crop than the spray. Now that's like really sick. Okay, so you're growing these seeds are in the ground, and then these seeds also take out more Roundup, which Monsanto still owns. But basically, they're a known allergen, and they're very harmful. And then this biological toxin is an immune stimulant to the mucosal and systemic response. So there's different types of immune responses. But what we're seeing is people with autoimmune diseases, very common. What are the names of some of the common autoimmune conditions?
Ulcerative colitis.
So basically, if it's overstimulated, it's tearing the body apart. So you see things like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's, celiacs, Hashimoto's. Yeah, you see a lot of that stuff. And some of it is definitely due to the genetically modified organisms and the biotoxins in the foods. When people get off that, their Hashimoto starts to level out. So either suppressing the immune system or ramping up the thyroid hormone is not the solution. I mean, if it worked, people would be